Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 221, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Friday, February 9th, 2024. It's Friday, as the kids say. I didn't know how to introduce this episode. I'm sorry, that's all I had. I'm tired of saying the same things over and over again. It's the best you're going to get out of me today. I'm busy with work. There is no time to waste. I hope you are having a good week, had a good week whenever you're listening to this. Lots of fun stuff to do this weekend, so be sure to go to holycitycenter.com to find out what is going on. Up at the top of the page, just click on events, and you'll see everything happening, not just this weekend, but beyond. Of course, Sunday is the Super Bowl. Some of you probably ecstatic about it, while others could not care any less. And then there's, of course, the group who are excited for halftime with Usher, the group that's excited about the commercials, and the group that's excited about Miss Taylor Swift being in attendance at the game, or at least assumed that she will be there. So, of course, that's the big thing on everyone's radar, I'm sure. So if you are going to any Super Bowl parties or what have you, have fun, enjoy the game. But as I said, so busy, I can't even continue on this path of just rambling about nothing. Let's get into the news. We've got some updates for you today on some past stories. The first one, there's been several updates on that tragic crash that happened on Folly Beach that left a bride just hours after the wedding ceremony dead and her husband seriously injured. There's been several updates on this, so let's dive into that right now. There is a proposed settlements from the multiple bars that are part of a lawsuit related to this crash. They've been accused of over-serving the young woman who was charged in the DUI death of that Folly Beach bride. Now, those settlements were sealed by a state judge last week, but a few details have emerged, and we'll get to how that happened. And it indicates that the settlement between all the bars that are looking to settle could run into the millions. So Circuit Judge Jennifer McCoy signed an order back on January 30th that was supposed to keep the settlement offers under seal between the bride's estate and the Folly Beach bars that are being sued. That includes the Drop-In, Snapper Jacks, and the Crab Shack. This is, pretty standard. A lot of times these settlements are kept under seal, meaning they're not supposed to be public. The judge said it was to maintain the confidentiality of the settlement and protect the privacy interests of the parties. However, not everyone followed the judge's rule or order, I should say. An attorney that was representing one of the bars talked to the Post and Courier about the settlement, saying that the restaurant's insurer has agreed to pay $1 million to settle all claims of injury made by the estate of 34-year-old bride Samantha Miller. The settlement also includes the groom and two family members who were riding in a golf cart at the time of the collision. A petition that was filed on February 5th shows that the groom's 17-year-old nephew is poised to receive almost $107,000 in the settlement after deducting $53,000 in attorney's fees. That allotment will be awarded to this 17-year-old nephew. He lives in Utah. And it will come in periodic payments over the next 7 years. This is all, by the way, pending a judge's approval. The juvenile, according to his grandmother's GoFundMe post, sustained the least serious injuries in the collision, which suggests that there might be a larger payout for his father, whose name is Benjamin Garrett, who was also riding in the golf cart at the time, and also, of course, a larger settlement for Eric Hutchinson, who is the groom in this story. So not only did he suffer injuries, so that's one side of these settlements, but of course, because the wedding occurred, he is serving as the personal representative of his wife's estate, although there has been some issues there, which we'll talk about in a moment. So that 17-year-old and his father were actually escorting the newlyweds from their beachside wedding reception on the night of April 23rd, 2023. They were on Folly's East Ashley Avenue when their golf cart was slammed from behind by a Toyota Camry that was driven by Jamie Lee Komorowski. She was driving at least 65 miles per hour, which is obviously well above the 25 mile per hour speed limit on that road. This according to the Folly Beach police report. Komorowski registered a blood alcohol content of more than 3 times the state's legal limit and has been in jail since that evening. She is awaiting trial. Sadly, the bride, as I'm sure most of you know, succumbed to her injuries at the scene, while Hutchinson suffered numerous broken bones and a brain injury that required two reconstructive surgeries, all resulting from that crash. Garrett, now that's the father of the nephew, so his uncle, whether uncle by marriage or whatever it may be, um, according to the online fundraiser, suffered severe road rashes, some scarring on his face, a broken vertebrae, and a torn labrum, which is a type of cartilage in the shoulder joint. If anybody follows sports, you've heard about torn labrums before, I'm sure. So that's what that injury is for those who don't know. So that $1 million I mentioned, that is just from one of those bars that's mentioned. That is a settlement from Snapper Jacks, and that's according to their attorney, Edward Pritchard. So he's the one who mentioned this to the Post and Courier, even though the judge was going to keep this under seal. But he's saying that Snapper Jacks, the insurance company they have, is going to pay out $1 million. Now, before the plaintiffs can receive any of that money, like I said earlier, judge does need to sign off on these settlements. That will happen at a hearing. We'll see, but it doesn't seem to be any indication that they won't sign off on it. Now, that hearing where the judge will decide if the settlements are accepted, that will be closed to the public. Who knows if information will leak out like this did, but that's how it's supposed to happen. So there likely won't be any updates as far as the total unless someone decides to talk. Now, one thing that might be holding it up, though, is something I alluded to before. The bride's mother has been butting heads with her daughter's husband, Eric Hutchinson, who I mentioned before. Uh, Hutchinson is actually named in a lawsuit against the bars individually and in his capacity as a personal representative of his wife's estate. However, his wife's mother, whose name is Lisa Miller, kind of brought all this into, everything was brought into question when last year she called into question the legitimacy of her daughter's hours long marriage and requested that a judge remove Hutchinson as a personal representative of her daughter's estate. So you may remember me talking about that in a previous podcast. She's kind of alleging that, well, they were barely married. It was only a couple hours. Like, should he really be the representative? I think my daughter would want me to be the representative. And it's put some of this into question. Now, if the settlements are approved, and we only know what one bar said, we don't know what the other settlements could potentially be. But if they are approved, Hutchinson and his family, or whoever money is going to potentially go to, they may only receive payouts from 3 of the 5 bars that were cited in the initial complaint. The reason for that is the other 2 bars are not wanting to settle, saying that they shouldn't be held accountable. So the restaurant where Komorowski was employed, Taco Bell on Folly Beach, is seeking to have the lawsuit tossed out. Um, Basically, there was some accusations that she may have drank there, and that the restaurant promoted this sort of atmosphere of drinking with supervisors and pressuring people to drink. They've denied it, calling it patently false. Also saying that Komorowski was only employed by them 4 days. It was 4 days before the crash that she was hired. So they're attempting to get that tossed out. So they may not end up being included. Meanwhile, the plaintiffs have dropped claims against El Gallo Bar and Grill, which is on Daniel Island, where they initially thought Komorowski had started her evening of bar hopping, or day of bar hopping, I guess, because it did start earlier in the day. El Gallo's owner, Chris Duran, told the Post and Courier that he provided the plaintiffs with receipts that showed Komorowski did not purchase alcohol at the restaurant on the day of the crash, saying that she had just ate lunch and that was it. He went on to say he was quite upset with this whole scenario, obviously because of what occurred. But as far as this lawsuit is concerned, he was upset because his business reportedly took a hit when the complaint was widely reported by news media. This was a huge story here and actually became a pretty big story nationally, being picked up by multiple outlets. And these restaurants that were being sued were all named in these stories. So obviously, he was a little bit upset that his business unnecessarily took a hit when he was able to provide receipts saying she didn't even drink here. We shouldn't be included in this. So the plaintiffs have already dropped them from the suit. So it appears 3 are going to settle, and the 4th may or may go to an actual court proceeding with Taco Boy. We'll see what happens there. So that's the latest update there. As I mentioned, Komorowski is still in jail as of this day. So she's been there since April. She's awaiting trial on what ultimately was 4 felony charges. So we'll obviously this will be in the news going forward even if settlements are actually kept secret and that doesn't get out. The trial certainly will be a big deal when that happens, and I'll be sure to update you on that. So lots of updates on that tragic situation, and I'll be sure to pass along more info as it comes out. On the last podcast, or maybe it was Mondays, it was this week though, I talked about how DHEC had recently come to a decision that any products that list Delta 8, Delta 9, THC, um, on the product itself, they would consider that a drug and not, say, for instance, a beverage that includes that. And so that has led some folks who sell hemp products in things like beverages or food or whatever it may be, being a little concerned. And one of the first pieces of a fallout from that is High Rise Beverage Company, which is a local company here in Charleston. They make hemp beverages. They have beverages that have CBD in them, which is fine. They're allowed to say CBD. At least that's my understanding from the DHEC report that they put out. But they have beverages that say like Delta 9 or Delta 8 or what have you. So now that there's some confusion over that, they have decided to stop distribution operations here in South Carolina. That was effective immediately when that report came from DHEC. So there's two reasons for that. Number one, their cans mention what is in them, and since they are not supposed to have that on there, that's one reason for the stop. But they also want to put on their beverages what's in there. They believe that the fact that they were selling a beverage product, not unlike a food product, people consuming those should know what's in them. But if you can't put what's in them, because DHEC says you'll be considered a drug and not a beverage, they're kind of in a tough spot. So they pulled their products off the shelves, or I shouldn't say that. I'm sorry. They've stopped distributing. I'm sure whatever's on the shelves is on the shelves and can still be sold, but they're not going to be distributing anything in this state for the foreseeable future as they try to figure this all out. Now, for those of you who like High Rise beverages, they did earlier this week unveil that they're coming out with an option, what they're calling the Blackout Edition. This is a new line of beverages, but it won't include hemp or THC in them in any capacity. It will have 4 flavors, and they say that these will include adaptogens instead. That's another popular thing, not unlike CBD. Different ashwagandha and stuff. Things like that, ingredients like that are what these beverages will have in them. Obviously, when they do roll that out here, I think next month, they said in March. Yeah, early March is when they're supposed to launch. You'll be able to see which flavors have specifically what adaptogens in them, but they will not have THC or hemp in them, so they are clear as far as DHEC's concerned. Now, in addition to rolling out those hemp and THC-free beverages, they've also pledged to donate 10 cents from every can sold from this Blackout Edition towards advocacy for hemp laws and educational initiatives out in the field. And trying to get some more education, maybe pushing for better legislation like other states have, where this is all perfectly legal and there's no issues, and just trying to push for that. So for now, no more distribution of the original High Rise beverages, but you will be able to see the ones that don't include any hemp or THC in them by early next month. Another significant update on a story from James Island. Jenn Drummond, you may remember, she was found on Woodland Shores Road here on James Island. She was unconscious. It appeared that perhaps she was hit by a car. But no one really knew what happened. It was early in the morning. No suspects have been named, and there really hasn't been much progress on her case. But thankfully, Drummond is making progress herself. She has no memory of what put her in a coma for 2 weeks, but she has battled back through rehab. You may remember, obviously, I just mentioned being in a coma for 2 weeks and stayed at MUSC for a while, was eventually moved to like a rehab facility. And she has a long road ahead of her, but she is doing better each day. So on Wednesday, she spoke to the public for the first time, and she took that time to thank people for their support. Also, she asked for more safety, specifically on the road where she was hit. Currently, she still has scars that remind her that something terrible happened, and specifically, it was the early morning hours of June 21st. So she knows something occurred, and obviously people have told her something has happened, but she has no memory of the actual incident. But she is continuing to recover and trying to put her life back together. So good to see that she was out there being able to speak to the public. She still, is struggling to remember parts of her life pre-accident. So still a little ways to go. She obviously suffered some sort of brain injury, which has been widely reported. So, I'm not breaking any news there, or giving away any personal medical information. So she's, still very much struggling to remember certain things and get back to herself, but has made very good progress. Now, meanwhile, the other side of the story, the Charleston County Sheriff's Office and Drummond's family seem to be at odds over what exactly happened that morning. And her family is still looking for answers. They insist this was a hit and run case, and say that the sheriff's department really hasn't given them many details, which has been frustrating for them. So while the family thinks it's a hit and run, you may remember when we talked about the story previously, the sheriff's department says the incident, not only is it still under investigation and they don't really have any leads, they feel like they've exhausted everything, but they believe that the injuries that Drummond has is consistent with someone who was hit while they were lying in the road, essentially saying for whatever reason she was laying down in the road. They haven't speculated as to why that would be, but that's what they believe, is she was lying in the road when she was hit, whereas the family thinks, it was a hit and run, but she was, standing, walking, running, whatever it may be, and not just lying in the road. So earlier this week, we talked about this case because police, as I said, they feel like they've exhausted all leads and the evidence that they have, and they've really not made any progress, at least that they're reporting publicly. And they re-released the photos of 3 vehicles that they want more information on because they were spotted on the road about the time they theorize that Drummond may have been hit. Photos are tough to see because it looks like they came from like a Ring camera or something similar. It was dark out because it was like 5 in the morning, between 5 and 6 a.m. But you can go back to the last episode, see the link in the show notes, and maybe you recognize one of those vehicles and can help out. Whether you recognize one of those vehicles or feel like maybe you do have some more information on this case, Crime Stoppers is offering a reward for any information on what happened. If you have anything, you can give them a call at 843-554-1111. And lastly, this is a news story as far as the lawsuit, but a story you may remember that this is stemming from. A former altar boy has filed a lawsuit against the Diocese of Charleston and the Bishop of the Diocese of Charleston for alleged sexual misconduct that was committed by Father Robert Kelly at St. Andrew's Catholic Church. This is according to court documents that ABC News 4 has been given or found on their own. The plaintiff, who filed the lawsuit anonymously, alleges that while serving under Kelly in the 1990s, he was groomed to engage in a sexual relationship. Those court documents also show that the plaintiff alleged the Diocese of Charleston was either aware or should have been aware of various improper and illicit sexual relationships Kelly had maintained before coming to or during his time at the Charleston Diocese. Kelly was previously reported as a priest credibly accused of sexually abusing minors in other jurisdictions by News 4. So this is a follow-up to that story. The lawsuit alleges that there was a responsibility to protect the plaintiff and that it allowed these predatory priests, in their words, to have unsupervised access to young boys, which then created the opportunity for priests like Kelly to groom and sexually abuse children. Kelly was a priest at St. Andrew's Catholic Church from 1990 to 1994, and it was during this time that the plaintiff said that he was touched, kissed, and fondled by the priests, all that again according to the court documents. Kelly, if you're wondering, died in 2004. That also is in the court documents. But the plaintiff is seeking damages for negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, breach of fiduciary duty, civil conspiracy, and negligent retention or supervision. In response to the lawsuit, the Diocese of Charleston said, "We have received a copy of the lawsuit and are currently reviewing it. We will respond to the pleading in due time." That will do it for this week and this episode of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you had a good week. Have a fantastic weekend. Again, if you need to find some fun things to do, just go to holycitycenter.com, see the latest news, and then you can click on events to see what events are coming up this weekend and going forward. Also, if you have a chance, I would love if you could rate, review, subscribe, whatever your streaming platform you're currently listening to this podcast on, whatever they allow you to do for a podcast. If you could do that, it'd be great. It helps expand the reach, and perhaps some new folks can find the show. I also need to thank Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System, who produces this podcast, and also Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode. I will talk to you all again on Monday. Enjoy the next few days. I can't wait to talk to you again. But until then, good night and good luck.